Chapter 136. You are nothing like that man at all. Jian Yun obeyed and sat in the passenger seat. When she saw that Huolian Cheng was on the phone again, she took out her phone and opened her QQ and WeChat to read the message. When she looked at it, she found that Shu Haiyang had actually sent her a WeChat message. Jian Yun could not help but frown. What Shu Haiyang did in the morning had already made her disgusted. He was still so indiscriminate and self-righteous. In his eyes, Lin Lanlan was a weakling, so he protected Lin Lanlan and did not hesitate to hurt her. There was also Shu Haiyang's mother, who was always so high and mighty. Nothing happened at home, and her father's business was big. Shu Haiyang's mother was still polite to her and tough as that. Every time they returned home during the holidays, Shu Haiyang's mother would always ask them to come back to his house for Forstek was heard. However, Jian Yun did not expect her face to turn so quickly. Shu Haiyang and Lin Lanlan's matter was discovered only a few days ago, and her mother was injured. At that time, Mrs. Shu's attitude towards her had completely changed, and her tone was as sharp and mean as it was today. Furthermore, she clearly told her that she would not allow Shu Haiyang to be with her again. Jian Yun rubbed her forehead and suddenly did not want to recall those past events. She did not open her mouth to see what Shu Haiyang had said. Right now, she was more worried about her mother's condition. What's wrong? Huolian Cheng's voice came. Jian Yun turned her head to look at him and saw that he was looking at her. His handsome face was still as cold as usual, but there seemed to be a whirlpool in his dark eyes. It's okay. How could Jian Yun tell him that she remembered the past with Shu Haiyang? She could only shake her head and find an excuse to avoid it. I was wondering when my mother could perform surgery. We will know tomorrow. He looked away. He took out his sunglasses and put them on. He did not ask Jian Yun about it, but his eyes behind the sunglasses narrowed slightly. Jian Yun was staring at her phone in a daze. He accidentally took a look and saw that Shu Haiyang's profile picture showed a red 33. He actually sent more than 30 messages in one breath. It seemed that he was really anxious. Huolian Cheng did not speak anymore. The rest of the way, the two of them were silent. Half an hour later, the car drove into the high-end residential area where Huolian Cheng lived. This was the second time Jian Yun came here. The underground parking lot was very quiet. Under the lights, Jian Yun saw that there were many luxury cars parked inside. It seemed that those who could afford to live here were all rich people. Huolian Cheng took out a box from the trunk and held Jian Yun's hand to lead her into the elevator. When he entered the door, he suddenly looked at Jian Yun and said, 2009-08-12. Jian Yun looked at him and blinked. She did not know why he said this string of numbers. Password, Huolian Cheng said. Ah? Jian Yun still could not react. Stupid. Huolian Cheng angrily flicked his finger on Jian Yun's forehead. Enter the password and press it. Oh. Jian Yun rubbed her forehead and turned to press the password lock. She had just pressed 2 numbers when she stopped. She seemed to be thinking. 3 seconds later, she turned her head to look at Huolian Cheng and said in embarrassment, I forgot. Can you say it again? 2009-08-12. Huolian Cheng was not impatient. He repeated it. What surprised Jian Yun was that his tone was very heavy, as if he was deliberately biting on every word. When he spoke, his pretty eyes were still focused on her. And there was even a trace of expectation in his eyes. Jian Yun did not think much at first, but when she pressed down on this string of numbers, her heart trembled. This clearly referred to the 12th of August, 2009-09. It was the year when her family was experiencing a dramatic change. It was also the year she found out that Shu Haiyang had an affair with Lin Lanlan. She would never forget it. But what was the meaning of this year to Huolian Cheng? It was so important that he used this string of numbers as the password to enter the door? Why didn't you press it? When Huolian Cheng saw Jian Yun press the last number, she suddenly stopped. She frowned as if she was deep in thought. He looked at her and his heart actually became nervous. Could it be that she remembered? However, Jian Yun only stopped for a moment. Just as Huolian Cheng finished speaking, she turned her head and looked at him. She did not say anything and pressed the last number. With a ding sound, the door opened. Jian Yun did not go in, but stood at the door. She tilted her head and asked Huolian Cheng, why you use this as the password? Is that day very important to you? Yes. Huolian Cheng stared into Jian Yun's eyes. He wanted to see something from her eyes, but what disappointed him was that Jian Yun's eyes were as clear as usual. She did not seem to have thought of anything. Huolian Cheng could not hide his disappointment. He pushed open the door and brought Jian Yun into the house. He led her directly to the guest bedroom. Jian Yun followed behind Huolian Cheng. She naturally noticed the cold and heavy aura on his body. She could not help but become curious and could not help but ask. Could it be that day is a Memorial Day? Huolian Cheng had just pushed open the door to the guest bedroom when he heard Jian Yun's question. He suddenly turned around and coldly asked, Do you really not remember at all? Jian Yun was shocked by his cold and angry eyes. She touched her heart and her eyes flashed. What do I want to remember? Huolian Cheng gritted his teeth and suddenly shook Jian Yun's hand. He angrily took off his coat and threw it on the bed. He walked to the window and put his hands in his pockets as if he was calm. We don't know each other before, right? Jinyun thought for a while and carefully asked. She looked at Huo Liancheng's appearance and found it really strange. He suddenly asked her if she remembered. No matter how slow her reaction was, she still found that something was not right. Although she asked this question, she did not think so in her heart, because she did not remember seeing Huo Liancheng at all. What do you think? Hearing this, Huo Liancheng turned to Jinyun. He pursed his lips and narrowed his eyes. Jinyun scratched her face. Huo Liancheng's question made her uncertain again. She hesitated and said, I don't think so. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense that I don't have any impression of you. Jinyun suddenly stopped when she said this. Her eyes were empty, as if she remembered something. Her eyes suddenly lit up again. She pulled open her collar and took out the ring. She narrowed her eyes and smiled. I remember when you said that the man who gave me the ring was someone I met in 2009. Other than him, I don't remember meeting other men that year. Huo Liancheng squinted his eyes when he saw Jianyun take out the ring. The ring was sparkling under the afternoon sun. The bright light instantly entered his eyes. Jianyun looked at Huo Liancheng's handsome facial features and frowned as she recalled the appearance of the man from back then. Then she shook her head affirmatively. It doesn't look like it. What doesn't look like? Huo Liancheng looked up. You and that bearded man are about the same height, but he is so skinny and thin. He doesn't have your figure at all. His hair is very long and he has a beard. He wears very ordinary clothes. He doesn't even have the money to go to the hospital when he is sick, Jianyun said. Chapter 137, Birthday Password. The more Jianyun thought about it, the more she felt that her comparison was stupid. She actually compared President Huo, the best bachelor in the world in terms of looks and wealth, to a homeless man? The difference between the two of them was more than the difference between clouds and mud. She had really gone mad. Is that so? However, when Huo Liancheng heard these words, he only quietly looked at Jianyun. His eyes were very dark and there were specks of light that fell like the bright night sky. There was a kind of attraction force to one's heart. However, Jianyun misunderstood his meaning. She thought that he looked at her like this because he did not like her comparing him to a vagabond who did not know where he came from. She could not help but laugh and awkwardly said, I'm sorry, I did not mean that. Pack up. From now on you will live here. Huo Liancheng changed the topic. He had regained his composure. Jianyun blinked. She looked at him with a calm face and could not help but doubt him. Did I just hallucinate? But he was clearly angry just now. Jianyun was confused. She felt that she really did not understand Huo Liancheng at all. Just like that, she actually dared to fake a marriage with him. Thinking of this, Jianyun's heart inexplicably tightened. She secretly glanced at Huo Liancheng. Even Ouyang Beicheng said that he was not a kind person. Jianyun began to suspect if there was some hidden reason why he approached her. Why are you looking at me? Huo Liancheng saw Jianyun's expression and knew that she must be imagining things again. He could not help sighing. This girl was fierce like a little wild cat with its claws open. She scratched people whenever she saw them. She would not be stupid even if she was stupid. Nothing. I just want to ask, don't you need to go to work? Jianyun blushed when she was found stealing glances. She did not have anything to say. Okay, let's go now. What surprised Jianyun was that this time, Huo Liancheng actually picked up his coat and turned around to leave. Jianyun heaved a sigh of relief, but then she saw Huo Liancheng turn around again. He took out his wallet from the pocket of his suit, took out a card and handed it to Jianyun. Take this card. The password is 90118. I don't want it. Jianyun quickly waved her hand, but she was immediately stunned. 901018. Isn't this her birthday? Why did Huo Liancheng use her birthday as the password? Was it a coincidence or a special one? Jianyun felt that her mind was suddenly in a mess, as if a voice was reminding her of something. She only saw Huo Liancheng stuff the card into her hand without any explanation and then leave without looking back. There's food in the fridge. Find it yourself if you're hungry. Before Huo Liancheng went out, he left a sentence behind. Jianyun heard the door bang and looked down at the bank card in her hand. She suddenly felt a headache. Who could tell her what was going on? Jianyun could not figure it out and did not think about it anymore. Now she still needed Huo Liancheng's help. Even if he really had an ulterior motive, she could not reject it. Huo Liancheng let Jianyun stay in the second bedroom, and the bed was also for 2 people. The bed sheets and blankets were already laid out. Jianyun touched the bed sheet. There was not a trace of dust on it, as if it had just been laid not long ago. The furniture here was very new. Presumably, no one had stayed in this room all this time. Jianyun took out all the clothes and piled them on the bed. She arranged them one by one and hung them in the wardrobe. Then, she placed the luggage. She was bored, so she wandered around the house. In the living room, the piano was still placed in its original position. Jianyun walked over and touched the extremely good texture of the piano. She opened the cover of the piano and lightly hit the keys. As she listened to the sound of the piano, she suddenly felt a little absent-minded. She still clearly remembered that the last time she was here, he had told her personally that if she rejected him again, even if she changed her mind in the future, she would not have the chance. She did not expect that her words were still in her ears. In a short period of time, she came here again, but had already become his nominal wife. John Yun's lips curled into a bitter smile. She was not in the mood to play the zither, so she closed the zither cover and turned to Huo Liancheng's bedroom. This place was still the same as the last time she saw it. It was very neat and spotless, but the color of the blanket had changed to iron gray, very cold, just like that person. There was a book on the bedside table that was half read. It was a famous economist's full English book. Jian Yun picked it up and flipped through it. There were too many technical terms in it. She was not studying economics, so she was naturally not interested in it. She looked at a few pages and then put it aside. Jian Yun went to the washroom again. Recalling the joke she made the last time, her face still had a fever. There was no change in the washroom. On the washing table there were a few simple men's toiletries. There was only a bottle of shaving water, and there was only a toothbrush in the mouthwash cup. Jian Yun looked at herself in the mirror. She looked so haggard and her chin was so sharp that it was scary. She could not help but smile bitterly. No matter how she looked at it, Huo Liancheng did not seem to get anything valuable from her fool. Then what did he want, after all he had done? After coming out of Huo Liancheng's bedroom, Jian Yun felt a little thirsty. She went to the kitchen to find water to drink. Who knew that the moment she entered the kitchen, her eyes lit up? This kitchen was too beautiful, wasn't it? It was very big, and the microwave oven was equipped with all kinds of facilities. In the middle of the kitchen was a counter. It was just that the kitchen was too clean. One look and one could tell that Huo Liancheng basically did not cook at home. There was hot water. It should be for his cleaning auntie. Jian Yun poured a cup of water and drank it as she looked at Huo Liancheng's house. After exiting the kitchen, she went to his study room again. Once she entered, she was shocked again. The books on the wall were bigger than the bookshelves in the 28th floor office of the Mings. There were even more books. The yellow pearwood desk was very big. There were a few books and a laptop on it. There was also a reclining chair near the window. This should be Huo Liancheng's private domain. Jian Yun could not go in and look at it, so she only looked at the door before closing the door and leaving. After wandering around for a while, Jian Yun was also tired. She wanted to go to the hospital to accompany her mother at night, so she decided to sleep for a while now. Jian Yun originally only wanted to squint for a while, but she did not know that it was almost 6 o'clock when she woke up. Furthermore, she slept very soundly. She quickly picked up her phone and looked. Sure enough, there were a few missed calls, including Huo Liancheng's 2 phone calls. The other 3 were unfamiliar numbers. Jian Yun touched her face. She still remembered that she had blacklisted Huo Liancheng's number a few days ago. How could he call her today? But now was not the time to consider this. Jian Yun hesitated for a moment and replied to Huo Liancheng first. When the call connected, Jian Yun quickly said, "I'm sorry. I just fell asleep. I didn't hear you on the phone." "Yes, I know." Huo Liancheng's voice was very low but also powerful. For some reason, Jian Yun felt very at ease. He seemed to be driving. Jian Yun could hear the sound of the car horn. He knew? How did he know? This thought suddenly flashed through Jian Yun's mind, but she did not think too much about it. She just asked him, "Is there anything you need me for?" Chapter 138. Little Wildcat, you want to scratch me again? The 2 cops in the morning called you. You didn't pick up. They contacted Director Li. They wanted you to go to the Public Security Bureau in the afternoon. I pushed it until tomorrow. Huo Liancheng said with a calm voice. Did they say anything? Jian Yun's heart jumped when she heard him. They asked you to make a statement. He paused and said, that fat policeman said that a case in the Beauchamp's Public Security Bureau is related to Lin Rong. She has already been arrested. Then did she plead guilty? Jian Yun was so excited that her voice rose. How could it be so easy? Huo Liancheng laughed lightly. Don't be nervous. I'm here. Jian Yun was worried. For a moment, her heart seemed to have skipped a beat. She did not make a sound for a long time. It was not until Huo Liancheng called her several times that Jian Yun came back to her senses. She replied, I still have 5 minutes to arrive. Get dressed and wait for me at the flower bed downstairs. Huo Liancheng reminded Jian Yun. What are we going to do? Jian Yun asked. Aren't you hungry after sleeping for an entire afternoon? Huo Liancheng sneered. Jian Yun had just gone downstairs when she saw Huo Liancheng's car coming and stopping right in front of her. Come up. The window in the back seat was lowered, and Huo Liancheng's handsome face was revealed. Jian Yun did not hesitate and opened the door behind her. She sat on it. Just as she sat down firmly, Huo Liancheng grabbed her hand. Hello, madam. The driver turned his head and greeted Jian Yun. Jian Yun's eyes twitched when she heard him call her madam. She smiled awkwardly. Hello, call me Jian Yun. Yo, how can I call you madam's name directly? I don't dare to. The driver was about 40 years old. He looked honest and reliable. Call her Miss Jian. Huo Liancheng played with Jian Yun's hand and said, Old Wang will take you in and out in the future. Jian Yun heard it and her eyes twitched again. She wanted to take her hand back, but she could not move it after a few tries. She could only say to Huo Liancheng, Don't bother. I can take the bus or the subway myself. Huo Liancheng looked up at her and said very calmly, The nearest bus station is 5 kilometers away from here. The nearest subway station is Chen Jialing Station. 20 kilometers away from here. Jianyun was speechless. She had actually forgotten that this was a rich area. The average price of houses was at least 1 or 200,000. How could people who could afford to live here squeeze into the bus and subway? But Jianyun could not suddenly accept the life of a driver. But now that there was an outsider, she could not refute Huo Liancheng and could only remain silent. Give me your phone. Huo Liancheng reached out his hand to Jianyun. Jianyun did not know what he wanted to do, but she still gave him the phone. Huo Liancheng unlocked the phone and opened a new contact. He entered a new number. This is Old Wang's phone number. If you need a car in the future, give him a call. After Huo Liancheng saved it, he handed the phone back to Jianyun. However, Jianyun's attention was not on this. She stared at Huo Liancheng suspiciously and asked with a frown, How do you know my unlock password? Huo Liancheng raised his eyebrows. You want to know? Jianyun nodded. Of course she wanted to know. She now felt that Huo Liancheng had too many mysteries and he knew her too well. She had to doubt him. Huo Liancheng tilted his head slightly. He extended his long hair and pointed at his cheek. Kiss me, and I will tell you. Jianyun's face immediately turned red. She subconsciously turned her head to look at Old Wang, who was driving quietly. Then, she unceremoniously pushed Huo Liancheng's face away and grumbled, Shameless, who wants to kiss you? Huo Liancheng was amused by the sentence. He reached out and wrapped his arm around Jianyun's shoulder. He looked at her sideways and said with a smile, Don't forget, you're Mrs. Huo now. You still have to fulfill some of your obligations. What obligations? Jianyun became nervous when she heard this. Could it be that he did not keep his word and went back on his word as soon as he received the certificate? Could it be that he wanted to force her? Why are you nervous? Huo Liancheng reached out and scratched Jianyun's nose. There was a smile on his handsome face as he moved closer to Jianyun's ear. In a voice that only the two of them could hear, he said, Wait for me at home after washing up tonight. When Jianyun heard these words, she immediately felt a wave of heat jump up from her feet and fiercely burn her face. She seemed to have been stung by a scorpion and subconsciously hid back. At the same time, she said angrily, Huo Liancheng, you are shameless. Huo Liancheng's strong arm was on the back seat of the car. He narrowed his eyes and looked at Jianyun. His smile was very flat. What did I say? Why am I shameless? You. Jianyun saw Huo Liancheng's proud smile and knew that he did it on purpose. He deliberately said those ambiguous words to tease her. She was furious. But there was still the driver, Old Wang, here. Although he did not seem to have any reaction to the sound from the back seat, as if he did not hear it, Jianyun still felt strange in her heart. She turned her face away and ignored Huo Liancheng. She even sat closest to the car door. She was far away from him and sulked. But how could Huo Liancheng let Jianyun go so easily? It was not easy for him to catch the little wild cat. It would be uncomfortable if he did not tease her. Come here, Huo Liancheng said. Jianyun pretended to look at the scenery outside but did not react. She felt more and more like a little rabbit that was abducted by a big bad wolf. Huo Liancheng directly stretched out his long arm and hooked it around her slender waist, bringing her over. Jianyun was angry and wanted to break his hand, but who knew that Huo Liancheng would suddenly kiss her? Jianyun was stunned. She opened her eyes wide and looked at Huo Liancheng's malicious eyes. Her reaction was slower by half a beat. By the time she wanted to resist, he had already let go of her. Wildcat, you want to open your claws and scratch me again? Huo Liancheng had a smile in his eyes. He pinched Jianyun's nose playfully. Jianyun trembled twice. She suddenly felt that to string. Was Huo Liancheng schizophrenic? If this man with a cold face suddenly said something like that, it would really make one's hair stand on end. Huo Liancheng saw Jianyun's disgusted expression, including her trembling, as if she had goosebumps. He could not help but raise his eyebrows. Do you have a problem with that? No. After knowing Jianyun for so long, she also somewhat understood Huo Liancheng's habits. This bastard's character was not weak at all. She must not go against him. Otherwise, he would only get more and more excited. You can't, but once you follow his lead, he would lose interest soon. Then come over here. Huo Liancheng hooked his finger at Jianyun again. Jianyun took a few deep breaths and told herself to hold it in. She still needed help from him. She must not fall out with him because of a moment of anger. Can you not act like you don't want to live? Huo Liancheng was speechless. He saw Jianyun moving towards him bit by bit and could not help but flick her forehead. Chapter 139. If there is danger ahead. If you're not satisfied, then forget it. Jianyun rolled her eyes at Huo Liancheng and stopped a foot away from him. Actually, she really wanted to ask him why he used her birth date as the password. This matter stuck in her throat and made her feel very uncomfortable. But Jianyun also knew that, if Huo Liancheng did not want to tell her, no matter how she asked, she would not get an answer, so she could only struggle on her own. When Huo Liancheng heard this, the corner of his mouth curled up into a wicked smile. He narrowed his eyes and looked at Jianyun. He leaned close to her ear and suddenly said, No one treats their investors like you. Jianyun only felt a bang in her head, as if something had exploded. It made her head buzz. She stared at Huo Liancheng in shock. There was a period of time when she felt that her brain was wooden and could not move at all. Immediately, her entire face seemed to have been dyed in blood. Inch by inch, it became Guangong's face. He actually heard it. After copying the marriage contract last night, she just casually said a sentence, and he actually heard it. At that time, she said it very quietly. Huo Liancheng saw that Zhen Yun was so embarrassed and did not tease her anymore. He patted her red face and said with a smile, "Your skin is really thin. You are so unfunny. You are really cute." Zhen Yun pouted. She was so angry that she did not know what to say. Fortunately, it did not take long for them to reach their destination. Old Wang parked the car steadily and immediately got out of the car to open the door of the back seat. He respectfully asked Huo Liancheng to get out of the car. Zhen Yun habitually opened the door herself, but as soon as she stepped out of the car, she saw Huo Liancheng walk over. He reached out to her. At this time, it was the first light of the day. The gorgeous neon lights slanted over from not far away and landed on Huo Liancheng's face. It added a trace of warmth to his originally handsome face. His eyes were very bright and very warm. He had a faint smile on his face. Zhen Yun was actually stunned for a moment when she saw this. "You're not getting off the car?" Huo Liancheng also had a smile on his face. Zhen Yun suddenly realized that she had been distracted by him again. She could not help but feel annoyed. Why had she been bewitched by his beauty recently? She had forgotten how bad and shameless he was. Thinking of this, Zhen Yun grinded her teeth and rolled her eyes at Huo Liancheng. Then she reached out her hand and placed it on his big hand, letting him pull her out of the car. Huo Liancheng brought Zhen Yun to a private restaurant. Zhen Yun looked at this place and found it familiar. Then she remembered the second day she met Huo Liancheng. She invited Chen Muz to dinner, and Huo Liancheng also came over. At that time, Chen Muz brought her to this private restaurant. President Huo was here? As soon as they entered, a middle-aged man came out to greet them. Zhen Yun also recognized him as the owner of this restaurant. His surname was Zhang. She had seen him the last time. Boss Zhang was very good at doing business. Huo Liancheng should come here often. Although Huo Liancheng showed a cold face as soon as he got out of the car, Boss Zhang was actually able to talk and laugh by himself. A restaurant that could attract Huo Liancheng's attention naturally wouldn't be bad. Zhen Yun realized that the dishes he ordered were also suitable for her. Of course, if he could not keep staring at her while eating, she would feel better. After the meal, it was already past 8 o'clock. Zhen Yun wondered how she could tell Huo Liancheng about going to the hospital to spend the night with her. However, before Zhen Yun could think about it, Huo Liancheng already asked, "Are you going to the hospital, or come with me to the airport to pick up Elson?" When Zhen Yun heard Elson's name, she immediately became energized. "I will go with you." But then she said with a sad face, "But I want to go and see Mother first." "Let's pick up the plane first, and then go see your mom, okay?" Huo Liancheng became gentle. He gently pinched Zhen Yun's cheeks and said gently, "With Elson's personality, he will definitely go to the hospital when he comes. We will go together when the time comes." Zhen Yun's heart jumped. Her long eyelashes lifted up and met Huo Liancheng's eyes. Looking at his rare gentle eyes, she suddenly felt a little warm. "Why are you looking at me like that?" Huo Liancheng asked. "I was thinking." Zhen Yun blinked. Her long and dense mascara fluttered gently like a butterfly's wings. She suddenly grinned. "You better not be so nice to me." "Why?" Huo Liancheng did not understand why this girl was so nice to people around him, whether they were friends or lovers. "You are so good to me. What if I really liked you?" Huo Liancheng asked. Zhen Yun squinted her eyes and smiled. She said it in a teasing tone. It was half a joke, so she would not feel embarrassed. "Isn't it good to like me?" Huo Liancheng's heart moved. He raised his eyebrows and asked. His eyes also revealed a fervent light. "It's not bad. To be honest, you are very good. You are better than all the men I know. But it is also because of this that it is not safe. If you know that the result is destined to fail, then you might as well not try from the beginning, so that you won't be sad." When she said here, Zhen Yun lowered her eyes and her voice was also faint. "Why do you always feel that the result of us being together is failure?" Huo Liancheng frowned. He was a little unhappy, but he also knew that this girl was afraid. It seemed that there were some things that could not be rushed. "Don't look at me like that. Your tone will make me misunderstand that you want to live with me for the rest of your life." Zhen Yun pursed her lips and smiled. "What if I say yes?" Huo Liancheng asked. "This joke is not funny at all." Zhen Yun started to change the topic. It was not that she did not notice Huo Liancheng's burning gaze, but even so, she did not believe him. She thought that he was only interested in her for a moment. It was not unreasonable for a man to become bad just because he had money. This world was too complicated. Since there was an opportunity to own the entire forest, who would hang themselves on a tree? Huo Liancheng was born with a golden spoon in his mouth. His marriage was very important. A woman who was qualified to be the daughter-in-law of Huo family must have power and influence. It could not be an ordinary woman like her. It was precisely because Zhen Yun knew this that Zhen Yun signed the marriage agreement. She knew that her marriage with Huo Liancheng could only be maintained for a year. He would leave the moment he got what he wanted. Otherwise, he would not be able to explain to his family that he had a wife like her. "What are you thinking?" Huo Liancheng saw Jian Yun's expression change, and the frown between his brows became even tighter. He did not like Jian Yun being pessimistic about her feelings. After failing once, she had completely sealed herself up. She would rather go on blind dates and find a random man to marry than give up a sincere love. This did not conform to her personality and his heart at all. It's nothing. Let's go. It will take an hour and a half to arrive at the airport. Jian Yun would not tell Huo Liancheng what she thought. She saw him look at her, so she pursed her lips and smiled. She took the initiative to hold his big hand and walk. If you really love someone and he loves you, but there will be many dangers waiting for you, will you fight for it? When they were about to reach the parking lot, Huo Liancheng suddenly asked in the night wind. Chapter 140, True Heart is not available. Why are you always asking questions tonight? Jian Yun did not answer. Instead, she turned her head and looked at Huo Liancheng hesitantly. You just have to answer me. Will you or won't you? Huo Liancheng insisted on Jian Yun's reply. Jian Yun lowered her head as if she was deep in thought. Huo Liancheng looked at her thick eyelashes and felt a trace of nervousness for no reason. However, Jian Yun only thought about it for a few seconds before raising her head to meet Huo Liancheng's gaze. She said firmly, Yes, if we love each other, I will fight for it, but the prerequisite is that he cannot betray me. Huo Liancheng secretly heaved a sigh of relief. He held Jian Yun's hand tightly, and a warm smile suddenly appeared on the corner of his mouth. On this cold spring night, that smile warmed Jian Yun's heart. Let's go, Huo Liancheng said gently. You haven't told me why you asked such a question. Jian Yun wanted to ask more. However, Huo Liancheng pointed at her nose and smiled. You will understand in the future. Jian Yun looked at his smile and almost thought that the female protagonist of the matter of love that he mentioned was her. However, she immediately remembered that she was in the office earlier. Her heart that had just palpitated felt as if it was suddenly blown by a cold wind and slowly cooled down. Jian Yun was not slow. She could feel that Huo Liancheng should like her. Otherwise, with a clean freak like him, he would not kiss her again and again. However, he would only like her and could not go any further. Therefore, no matter how good he was to her now, and how exaggerated his words were, she could not take the risk to show her sincerity. Otherwise, the one who would be injured in the end would only be her. It was almost 10 o'clock when Huo Liancheng and Jian Yun arrived at the airport. There was a flight just arriving, and there were many people at the airport exit. The people who picked up the plane mixed with the people who came out. It was bustling with activity. Huo Liancheng looked at his watch. After waiting for about 15 minutes, he took Jian Yun's hand and entered the airport. As soon as the two of them entered, the airport broadcast was broadcasting the arrival of the flight from Burr to Green Lake. Not long after, Jian Yun saw people walking towards them. There were foreigners and Huaxia people among these people. Without exception, when everyone saw Huo Liancheng and Jian Yun, they all looked at them in surprise. The man was tall and handsome, and he had an extraordinary temperament. The woman was petite and cute. Although she did not put on makeup, she looked like a lotus flower that came out of water. She was elegant and unconventional. When these two people stood together, it was truly a pleasing combination. However, Jian Yun did not have the time to care about anything else. She only nervously stared at the crowd, wanting to find Dr. Elson among the foreigners. Huo Liancheng could not help but find it funny when he saw, You have never seen him before. You can recognize him even from the looks of it? He asked. Although I haven't seen him before, I know what he looks like. Jian Yun pursed her lips and said. In American dramas, people with such authority are usually a little older and not very good looking. Then they would have very little hair or a Mediterranean hairstyle. They would wear glasses and look very serious. One look and you can tell that they are very powerful. Then look at me. Do you think I am powerful? Just as Jian Yun finished speaking, a voice sounded beside her. It was in Mandarin, but the tone was stiff. One could tell that it was a foreigner. Jian Yun turned her head and saw that the person who spoke was indeed a foreign man with blonde hair and blue eyes. He was around 30 years old. He was very young and also very handsome. He had a head full of thick, golden short hair. His blue eyes were as clear as the blue sea. At this moment, he was grinning at her. Jian Yun subconsciously glanced at Huo Liancheng. He was also looking at her. Seeing Jian Yun look over, Huo Liancheng winked at her. Jian Yun's heart moved and immediately said to the foreign man in all seriousness, Sir, I see that your bones are strange. Your appearance is heroic, and you have an imposing appearance. That is a strange man that is rarely seen in 100 years. Of course you are powerful. Can't you be more powerful? The blond man frowned, as if he could not understand. Is that amazing or not? Very powerful. Jian Yun forced herself to hold back the corner of her mouth and continued to beat around the bush seriously. Just by looking at your appearance, I know that you must be a powerful expert among experts. What is an expert? My hands are very long but not very high. The foreign man reached out his hand and gestured. Huo Liancheng could not hold back his laughter. He looked at the foreign man's confused look and could not help shaking his head and laughing. Elson, she's praising you. Oh, I know that. Dragon and phoenix among men. That is Li Xiaolong. Elson's eyes lit up when he heard that. As he spoke, he made a classic pose of Li Xiaolong. Jian Yun covered her face. She could not bear to look at him. The contrast between this guy and the top authority in the world in her heart was too big. Elson, long time no see. Huo Liancheng reached out his hand to Elson. Long time no see, old friend. Elson stopped playing tricks. He held Huo Liancheng's hand tightly in the air. The two of them touched their chests. It seemed that they were quite familiar with each other. Ah, so you are Dr. Elson? Oh my God, I didn't expect you to be so young and so good-looking. Jian Yun realized that this foreign man was Elson when Huo Liancheng winked at her. However, she still had to act like she had just recognized him. She had a pompous look on her face. Shouldn't I be a serious old man with only a few hairs on his head? Elson winked at Jian Yun mischievously with his right eye. Of course not. Jian Yun pulled the corner of her mouth and expressed her feelings. I knew you must be a big shot when I saw your name. Shouldn't the person who shocked the world be Hua Kui? Elson raised his eyebrows. If you continue to talk nonsense, it will be fake. Huo Liancheng saw Jian Yun talking nonsense more and more. He could not help but wrap his arms around her neck and pull her into his arms. He teased her by her ear. You even know about Hua Kui? Jian Yun struggled out of Huo Liancheng's arms and revealed her head with a shocked expression. Could it be that this Elson was a person who was well versed in China's culture? Didn't I tell you? I studied in your country for 2 years and studied TCM for 2 years. As Elson walked, he looked maliciously at Huo Liancheng's hand on Jian Yun's shoulder. I see. No wonder you speak Mandarin so well. Jian Yun suddenly realized that her and Huo Liancheng's posture were too intimate. She could not help but blush as she tried to get rid of his hand. But how could Huo Liancheng let her go? Instead, he hugged her tighter. Jian Yun could not get rid of him. It was not good to embarrass him in front of Elson, so she could only let him do as he pleased. When she got into the car, Jian Yun originally wanted to quietly sit in the passenger seat. Who knew that, just as she climbed up, she was grabbed by Huo Liancheng by the collar and dragged down like a chicken. He said to Elson, You sit. Elson smiled and looked at the frowning Jian Yun. He shrugged and got into the car. Jian Yun was escorted to the back seat by Huo Liancheng.